The Aboriginal people early on discovered that the peninsula located between two small estuary systems was very rich in fish and shellfish. This was first reflected probably at the very tip of the peninsula where a very large shell mound once stood, sorry to say removed subsequently for Connie road fill. The large shell mound at Cortez dated to at least 2000 BC in its lower levels and perhaps even earlier in time, a time predating the invention of pottery, but nonetheless a spot used for many, many generations by native peoples harvesting the rich resources of the estuaries. In constructing their technology for fishing, the Aboriginal people used shell to produce sinkers for their nets, and the nets were generally made out of native fibers, predominant among those from the cabbage palm, our state tree. This is the boot of the branch of a cabbage palm, and where it connects to the tree, you get this kind of woolly fibrous material, which is very effective via twining to make ropes and twine and such for netting. You can see even just twisting it like so, it's very strong material. And so we know that the Aboriginal people use such material as this to make their fishing nets.
This one here, this is made out of a smaller conch. And you can always tell a shell come off of an Indian mound, you'll find there'll be a hole in the back. They always break a hole in the back, which takes, let's see, breaks the vacuum, and then they can pull the conch right out. But they got to have that hole in the back. That way, when you walk in the beach and you see conch shells with a hole in them, that's an Indian mound you're walking on, or near one, right around close. This one was used for a club. I don't know if I can see it or not, but you got a round hole here and a groove cut here. And they line up and they go straight. They don't go completely straight through. It's offset a little and you get a tension. When you look through it, you can see it's offset center. And they run a stick through there and jam it in tight and it stays stiff. And they use it as a handle that they put on it to work with. That's what caused it to be like that, where they've been beating and framming with it. And this one is like a lot of others that I find, this was used as a scraper. You can tell by the slant that they got on this front part here, where this conch shell used to come on out a long way. But they ground it, use it, and for somehow, I don't know what they were scraping, I presume hides. But this one was used as a scraper, and we find a lot of them that were scrapers, but they used more or less a centerpiece. I should have gotten one and brought one out. But this one was caught my eye. When I found it, I thought, well, what all these holes for? One of them I don't know what it was for, the square one. But these two right here stand to reason. Put your fingers in there and you got it where you can go to town with it and not knock your fingers on something. It's a handle. But what that was for, I don't know, unless it was for something for junk and all to fall up, scrape when they were scraping, go in and fall out of there. But I don't believe that's what that was for. I really don't know what that hole was for there. This is one I found and part of it, as you can see, they done cut one of these off. And they made beads out of these. The center of a conch shell was used quite a bit. I've got several dozen of them that show wear and tear. This one had the back end of the conch still on it, so I'm sure kept it because it shows where they were cutting it off. Now, what they used to cut it with, I don't know. But they had some way of grinding. They ground one off and then broke it and then had another one cutting. And whether the white man come along and chased him away from it or what, I don't know. But I've kept it in my collection because it shows I've got beads that are made out of these. Some of them are this long, of the center of a conch, just this core. and then they grind them down, and they got a knob on the back on one end and a point on the other, and the knob is supposedly to tie with, but to tie it on the neck. Some folks think that those are not beads; they think they're sinkers, and I don't know which it is, whether it's sinkers or beads. And it's something that's a common thing, you might say, around the Indian mounds. You'll find any of these tools, but you got to look and realize when you pick one up and check it over good to see where it's worn and how it's worn to tell how he used it.
In our part of the world, history begins at about 1500 with the arrival of the Europeans. The Spanish began intensively harvesting many of the same resources the native peoples had previously.
Fishermen from Cuba began to travel to this coast during the mullet season to fish during the late 1600s and early 1700s. The men built structures on the shore, 15 feet square, and covered them with palmetto thatch. This is where they lived and processed the fish. They caught shark for the oil and turtles for the glue. They saved the mullet red roe, which was smoked. The fishermen also captured exotic birds, including flamingos, and carried them back to the rich Cubans.
Seasonal groups of fishermen from Cuba would set up coastal camps along the southwest shores of Florida to collect fish, which they smoked and dried and salted and then shipped back to Cuba. We have evidence of a number of these fish camps around Tampa Bay, including one on Sneed Island and perhaps one in the area of Cortez. The maps are, of course, not extremely accurate from these earlier periods. They're gross in delineation, but it's possible we may have had a Spanish rancho, as they were called, in the area of Cortez in the middle 1700s.